We need new horsepower. The words hit the conference room like a sledgehammer. I sat at the end of the polished table, my coffee growing cold as the board chairman's voice echoed off the glass walls. 18 years with Gravora Group, and this was how it ended. My name is Walter Briggs. I am 58 years old, and until that moment, I was Senior Vice President of Operations for one of Houston's most reliable logistics companies. I had built their route network from scratch, saved 3 major accounts during the 2008 recession, and guided them through another downturn in 2020 without laying off a single driver. I thought that counted for something. We are bringing in someone with a fresh outlook, the chairman continued, not meeting my eyes. Someone who understands modern business dynamics. I knew exactly who that someone was. Chase Langford, 33 years old, married to the chief executive officer's daughter with a background in lifestyle marketing and zero experience in logistics. I had heard the whispers for months. The family dinners where business was discussed. The golf outings where decisions were made before they ever reached the boardroom. I folded my hands on the table and waited. No point in arguing. No point in listing my accomplishments or the contracts I had personally managed. The decision was already made, probably weeks ago. Walter, we appreciate everything you have done for Gravora Group, the chief executive officer said, finally looking in my direction. His voice carried the practiced tone of someone who had rehearsed this conversation. Your dedication has been noted. Noted. 18 years reduced to a single word. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes. They discussed transition plans, my replacement timeline, and the farewell gathering they would host. I listened without speaking, my mind already elsewhere. In my jacket pocket, I felt the edge of a business card I had been carrying for 3 months, a card that might change everything. After the meeting, I walked back to my office and began packing my personal items. The farewell gathering was scheduled for the following Friday, just enough time for Chase to shadow me and learn the basics of what I had spent nearly 2 decades perfecting. As I placed my coffee mug in the cardboard box, my phone buzzed. A text from my daughter, Catherine. How did the board meeting go, Dad? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, big changes coming. I did not tell her I had just been forced into early retirement. I did not tell her that my replacement was a 30-something with connections but no experience. I would save that conversation for later when I'd figured out my next move. The business card in my pocket felt heavier now. It belonged to someone who had reached out months ago, someone who understood the value of long-term relationships in this industry, someone who might be very interested in what I had to offer. The next morning, I sat in my office earlier than usual, watching the sunrise paint the Houston skyline orange and gold. I had been coming to this same office since 2007, back when Gravora Group was a mid-size operation struggling to compete with the major players. I helped change that. I remembered my first major victory, the Petromax Industries contract, a $120 million deal that everyone said we were too small to handle. I spent 6 months building relationships with their procurement team, learning their delivery requirements and designing a route system that cut their costs by 15%. When we landed that contract, the chief executive officer called me into his office and shook my hand. Walter, you just saved this company, he had said. That was back when he still remembered my contributions. Over the years, I had built something solid here. Real relationships with drivers who trusted me, clients who respected our reliability, and vendors who knew a handshake with Walter Briggs was as good as any contract. I had missed family dinners to handle crisis shipments. I had worked through weekends to resolve route conflicts. I had even mortgaged my house to help cover payroll during the lean months of 2009. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. The chief executive officer's son-in-law started showing up to client meetings. Chase would sit in the corner, taking notes on his phone, asking questions that showed he fundamentally misunderstood our business model. The clients were polite, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. Why was this kid here? The warning signs had been building for months. My input was requested less frequently in strategic meetings. Budget decisions that used to require my approval were suddenly handled by the finance team. When I raised concerns about a proposed route change that would impact our largest client, I was told my perspective was valuable but perhaps too focused on the past. 3 months ago, everything became clear. I was reviewing our quarterly client satisfaction reports when Alyssa Cormack from Petromax Industries called my direct line. Alyssa had been my primary contact there for 8 years, and I considered her both a professional ally and a friend. "Walter, I need to ask you something off the record," she had said. "Are there changes coming at Gravora Group? Some of our executives are hearing rumors about new leadership in operations." I had been honest with her. Nothing official yet, but there might be some transitions in the works. "I see," she had said quietly. Then she had given me her personal business card. "If anything changes, call me. The relationship we have built is too important to lose." I had thanked her and tucked the card in my wallet, not thinking much of it at the time. Now, sitting in my office for what might be one of the last times, I understood what she had really been offering. Not just her business card, but a lifeline. Friday afternoon arrived like a slow-moving storm. The farewell gathering was scheduled for 4 p.m. in the main conference room, the same room where my career had been ended 3 days earlier. I spent the morning training Chase on our major accounts, watching him nod along while clearly not grasping the complexity of what we did. "So basically, we just move stuff from point A to point B," he said during our session on the Petromax contract. "How hard can it be?" I did not correct him. I just handed him the client folder and suggested he review the delivery specifications carefully. At 3:30 p.m., I gathered my remaining personal items and headed to the conference room. The company had ordered a cake with "Thank you, Walter" written in blue frosting. There were maybe 20 people there, mostly drivers and warehouse staff who had worked with me for years. The board members had other commitments, apparently. The chief executive officer gave a brief speech about my contributions and dedication. He mentioned my years of service and wished me well in my future endeavors. When he finished, Chase stepped forward. "I just want to say," Chase began, that familiar smirk creeping across his face, "that Walter has done great work here. But business evolves, you know. We need new energy, new ideas. Your time is over, old man, but do not worry. I will take good care of everything you built." The room fell silent. A few of the drivers shifted uncomfortably. One of the warehouse supervisors actually looked away. I felt something inside me go very quiet and very still. I did not react. I did not argue. I simply stood up, shook hands with the people who mattered, and walked out with my cardboard box. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck for a long time, not starting the engine. The sun was setting behind the office building, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I thought about 18 years of early mornings and late nights. I thought about the clients who trusted me and the employees who depended on me. I thought about Chase's smirk and his casual dismissal of everything I had accomplished. Then I pulled out my phone and found Alyssa Cormack's business card. She answered on the second ring. "Walter, I was wondering when you would call." "The board made their move," I said simply. "I heard. Chase Langford, right? The son-in-law with the marketing background?" "That is right." There was a pause. Then Alyssa said, "Walter, I think it is time we had a conversation. Are you free for dinner tomorrow?" I started my truck and pulled out of the Gravora Group parking lot for the last time as an employee. "I will be there," I said. As I drove home, I felt something I had not experienced in months. Not anger, not bitterness, but clarity. The game was just beginning. Saturday evening, I met Alyssa at a quiet steakhouse on the west side of Houston. She had chosen a corner booth away from the main dining area, and I understood why when she opened her leather portfolio and spread several documents across the table. "Before we talk business, I want you to know how sorry I am about what happened," she said. 18 years of partnership, and they replace you with someone who asked me last week if we needed our chemicals delivered in refrigerated trucks. I almost smiled at that. "He asked you about refrigerated trucks for industrial lubricants?" Apparently he confused us with a food service company. Alyssa shook her head. "Walter, I have been doing procurement for 15 years. I have never worked with anyone more reliable than you. When you say a delivery will arrive at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, it arrives at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. She pulled out a contract summary. This is our current agreement with Gravora Group. $120 million over 3 years, renewable. It represents about 40% of their total revenue. I knew those numbers by heart. It does. Here is what Chase does not understand, she continued. This contract exists because of relationships, not just competitive pricing. When we had the pipeline incident in 2018 and needed emergency chemical deliveries, you personally drove out to our facility at midnight to coordinate the response. When our usual vendor failed us during the freeze last year, you found an alternative supplier in 6 hours. I remembered both situations clearly. That is the job. No, Walter, that is not the job. That is going above and beyond repeatedly, for years. And now they expect me to maintain that same level of service with someone who thinks logistics is just moving stuff from point A to point B. Alyssa leaned forward. I have been authorized by Petromax Industries to explore alternative logistics partnerships. Our contract with Gravora Group expires in 60 days. If we choose not to renew, they lose their biggest client. I set down my coffee cup carefully. What are you suggesting? Bayflex Maritime approached us 6 months ago. They are expanding their inland logistics division and looking for experienced leadership. They offered me a very competitive proposal, but I told them we were happy with our current provider. She paused. That was when our current provider included you. I understood now why she had wanted this conversation off the record. And if I were to join Bayflex Maritime? Then we would have a reason to reconsider their proposal. Over the next hour, Alyssa laid out the details. Bayflex Maritime was a Houston-based company with strong financials and aggressive expansion plans. They needed someone with established client relationships to lead their new logistics division. The position would be executive consultant with significant equity participation. The offer is substantial, she said, sliding a document across the table. But more importantly, it is a chance to build something new without the politics and family connections that derailed your career at Gravora Group. I reviewed the terms quickly. The base salary was competitive, but the equity package was extraordinary. If Bayflex Maritime achieved their projected growth targets, my stake would be worth more than I had made in my last 5 years combined. There is one condition, Alyssa added. Bayflex Maritime needs an answer within 2 weeks. They want to announce the new division leadership before the end of the month. I looked up from the documents. 2 weeks is not much time. It is enough time for Gravora Group to realize what they are losing, she said. I plan to inform them next Friday that we will not be renewing our contract. I will also mention that we are exploring partnerships with companies that have more experienced leadership. We finished dinner discussing logistics and market conditions, but my mind was already working through the implications. Chase would have to handle the Petromax Industries relationship for exactly 9 days before learning they were taking their business elsewhere. He would have no idea how to respond, no relationships to leverage, no understanding of what had gone wrong. As I drove home, I felt something I had not experienced since my termination. Anticipation. Not for revenge exactly, but for the opportunity to prove that experience and relationships still mattered in business. I had 48 hours to make my decision, but honestly, I had already decided the moment Chase called me an old man whose time was over. Monday morning, I called Bayflex Maritime and arranged a meeting with their executive team. The company headquarters was located in a modern office complex near the ship channel, and as I walked through their lobby, I could see why Alyssa had been impressed with their proposal. The chief executive officer, Victoria Henley, was a former ExxonMobil executive who understood the energy logistics business inside and out. She had founded Bayflex Maritime 5 years earlier, with backing from private equity investors, and they had grown rapidly by focusing on specialized chemical and petroleum transport. Walter, your reputation precedes you, Victoria said as we sat down in her office. I have heard nothing but positive feedback about your work at Gravora Group. The Petromax Industries relationship alone is worth more than most companies generate in total revenue. I appreciated her directness. Alyssa Cormack suggested you might be interested in expanding into inland logistics. More than interested. We have been planning this expansion for 18 months, but we needed the right person to lead it. Someone with established relationships and proven results. She leaned back in her chair. What Alyssa may not have mentioned is that we have been watching Gravora Group's performance closely. Their client retention has declined significantly over the past year. This was news to me. I was not aware of any major client losses. 3 accounts terminated their contracts in the last 6 months. All cited concerns about service reliability and communication issues. The board has been scrambling to maintain revenue, which is probably why they made the changes they did. Victoria pulled out a folder. We did some research after Alyssa contacted us. Gravora Group's financial position is not as stable as it appears. They have been using short-term credit lines to cover operational costs, and their debt-to-equity ratio has increased substantially. I studied the documents she provided. The financial analysis showed a company under pressure, making desperate moves to cut costs and attract new investment. Replacing experienced leadership with family connections was starting to make sense from their perspective, even if it was strategically short-sighted. How did you obtain this information? I asked. Public filings mostly, plus industry contacts who have been watching their performance. Victoria smiled. The logistics business is smaller than people think. Word travels fast when a company starts struggling. She explained that Bayflex Maritime had been positioning themselves to acquire distressed competitors, but the opportunity to hire experienced leadership and attract their client base was even more appealing. If I joined their team and brought the Petromax Industries contract with me, it would accelerate their growth plans by years. There is something else you should know, Victoria said. We have been in preliminary discussions with 2 other former Gravora Group clients. They are both expressing interest in switching providers, but they want assurance that they would be working with experienced logistics professionals. I recognize the names she mentioned. Both were accounts I had managed personally, relationships built over years of reliable service and problem solving. If those clients followed Petromax Industries to Bayflex Maritime, Gravora Group would lose nearly 60% of their revenue within a matter of months. What would be my role in client transitions? I asked. You would lead the entire inland logistics division, full operational authority, equity participation, and complete independence to build the team you need. Victoria paused. The only requirement is that you maintain the service standards that made you successful at Gravora Group. As I drove back home, I understood that this was about more than just my career transition. Gravora Group had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had assumed their client relationships were tied to the company, rather than the individual who had built and maintained those relationships. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Tuesday morning, I signed the contract with Bayflex Maritime. Victoria Henley handled the paperwork personally, and we agreed that my official start date would be the following Monday. That gave us exactly 1 week to coordinate the client transitions and prepare for what was coming. My first call was to Alyssa Cormack. It is done, I said simply. Excellent. I will be meeting with Chase Langford on Friday to discuss the contract renewal. Should be an interesting conversation. What will you tell him? The truth, that Petromax Industries has decided to explore alternative logistics partnerships, and we will not be renewing our agreement with Gravora Group when it expires next month. I could picture Chase's reaction. He would probably try to schedule an emergency meeting with the chief executive officer, scrambling to understand what had gone wrong. But by then, it would be too late to salvage the relationship. Alyssa, I want you to know I appreciate the risk you are taking. Walter, this is not a risk. This is a business decision based on 18 years of exceptional service. Petromax Industries needs reliable logistics partners, and you represent reliability. Wednesday and Thursday I worked quietly from home, developing transition plans and reviewing client files. Victoria had provided me with detailed information about Bayflex Maritime's capabilities, and I was impressed with their infrastructure and technological systems. In many ways, they were better positioned than Gravora Group to handle complex logistics requirements. Thursday evening, my phone rang. The caller identification showed Gravora Group's main number. Walter, this is James from the Chief Executive Officer's office. Mr. Davidson would like to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow morning. Would 9 a.m. work? I almost laughed. What does he want to discuss? He did not provide details, but he mentioned it was regarding client relationships and transition planning. Tell Mr. Davidson I am no longer available for transition planning. My employment with Gravora Group ended last Friday. Sir, I think there may be some misunderstanding. This would be a paid consultation. There is no misunderstanding, James. Have a good evening. Friday morning, while I was reviewing contracts at Bayflex Maritime's offices, Victoria knocked on my door. You might want to see this, she said, handing me her phone. It was a news alert from the Houston Business Journal. Gravora Group loses major client. Stock drops 15%. The article was brief but accurate. Petromax Industries had announced they were terminating their logistics contract with Gravora Group, citing strategic realignment with a new service provider. The stock market had responded immediately, driving share prices down in heavy trading. How did the media find out so quickly? I asked. Petromax Industries is publicly traded. They had to file a disclosure about the contract termination. Victoria smiled. The business community is very interested in their choice of new logistics provider. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Walter, this is Chase Langford. We need to talk immediately. Call me. I showed the message to Victoria. What do you think? I think Chase Langford is having a very bad day, she said. And it is about to get worse. That afternoon, I received 2 more calls from former clients asking about my availability for consulting work. By evening, it was clear that word had spread throughout the Houston logistics community. The experienced professional was available, and companies were interested. I did not call Chase Langford back. I did not contact Gravora Group's executive team. I did not gloat or make public statements about my transition. I just answered the phone when it rang and scheduled meetings with prospective clients. The market would handle the rest. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my new office at Bayflex Maritime when Victoria knocked on my door with a newspaper folded under her arm. You are going to want to read this, she said, placing the Houston Business Journal on my desk. The headline read, Gravora Group seeks emergency funding after client exodus. The article detailed everything that had unfolded since my departure. Petromax Industries had been the first to leave, followed within days by Morrison Chemical and Gulf States Energy. Both companies had announced partnerships with Bayflex Maritime, specifically citing the experience and reliability of our logistics team. Within 2 weeks, Gravora Group had lost nearly 70% of their major contracts. The board had called an emergency meeting. Chase Langford had resigned, citing personal reasons and family obligations. The chief executive officer had been forced to accept a bridge loan from private investors just to maintain operations. There is more, Victoria said, pointing to a smaller article on the facing page. Chase Langford has joined his father-in-law's real estate development company. Apparently, logistics was not the right fit for his skill set. I folded the newspaper and set it aside. What about their remaining operations? They are trying to rebuild with a smaller client base. The new operations manager is actually someone you trained, Jacob Miller. He reached out yesterday to ask if we might consider some kind of partnership arrangement. I remembered Jacob. Good worker, solid understanding of the business, but he had inherited an impossible situation. What did you tell him? That we would be happy to discuss subcontracting opportunities if they could meet our service standards. It was a professional response. Bayflex Maritime was growing rapidly, and we needed reliable partners to handle overflow capacity. If Gravora Group could rebuild their operations and maintain quality standards, there might be room for collaboration. But that would be a business decision, not a personal one. 6 months later, I was driving through downtown Houston when I passed the building that had housed Gravora Group's headquarters. A for lease sign hung in the front window. They had relocated to a smaller facility on the south side of town, focusing on local delivery services and subcontracting work. Jacob Miller was doing his best to rebuild the company's reputation, but the damage had been substantial. Most of their former clients had moved on to other providers. I pulled into a coffee shop and sat by the window, watching the early morning traffic. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Dad, saw the article in Forbes about Bayflex Maritime. Congratulations on the expansion. The Forbes piece had highlighted our company's rapid growth and successful entry into the inland logistics market. We had tripled our client base and expanded operations to 3 additional states. The equity stake that had seemed optimistic 18 months earlier was now worth more than I had earned in 20 years at Gravora Group. But the real satisfaction was not financial. It was walking into our warehouse every morning and seeing drivers who trusted my leadership, working with clients who valued long-term relationships, and building something sustainable rather than just profitable. I finished my coffee and drove to the office. Victoria was already there, reviewing proposals for our next expansion phase. We had been approached by companies in Dallas and San Antonio, and the demand for experienced logistics management was higher than ever. "Good morning, Walter," she said as I walked into the conference room. "Ready to change another industry?" I sat down and opened my laptop. Outside the window, Houston was waking up to another day of opportunity and possibility. "Let's get to work," I said. The phone rang and I answered it just like always.